Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I am your host for the show. And as always, I'm thrilled to have you along. If you would hit subscribe, that would be wonderful. You'll always be updated with new episodes as they come out. Quite a long list of episodes that have come out in the last 7 years of publishing episodes of Keys to the Shop, running from all sorts of different topics that are relevant to running a wonderful coffee shop and providing great experiences for your cafe's guests. So hit subscribe to this channel. If you're watching on YouTube, on a podcast player, go ahead and do that now. And I want to let you know that Keys to the Shop, in addition to doing this podcast, also offers consulting and coaching for you and your business. That looks like me getting to work one-on-one with you to help you elevate your operations, your people, your quality in your coffee shops. And I've been thrilled to work with so many great people over the years. And maybe that is the right fit for you. So email chris@keystotheshop.com to learn more, set up a free discovery call, and let's have a conversation. So now today's episode is sponsored by Ground Control, and Ground Control is upending what we can actually experience from batch brew coffee and more. They use SCA award-winning technology to create a next level coffee. It gives you control over the depth and range of flavor in the coffee that previously you couldn't really access with traditional batch brewing methods. And they've been doing this for years now. And it doesn't just make amazing batch brew coffee, but it also makes tea, batch iced lattes, batch cold brew. So not only does it up your level of quality, but also introduces new levels of profitability, efficiency on the bar. So it's a really great option for your cafe. Go check them out at groundcontrol.coffee to learn more. Who's using the machine, all about the technology and more. If you're looking to really take your coffee to the next level and provide that great experience for your guests, then you should probably consider using a Ground Control Cyclops brewer for your cafe. Check them out at groundcontrol.coffee. And also, one of the things that I love about working in coffee is the look on the face of somebody who gets something that's prepared with love. And when it has latte art on it, when it's done with intentionality, I feel good about it as a professional. Customer loves it. It's a win-win. That is why, in a world where plant-based beverages are just not only the norm, but actually dominating in certain markets, the Barista series from Pacific is crucial. And that is the line of plant-based performance beverages produced by Pacific for baristas. And it's designed for them, and it's also tested by them before any of the products are launched into the market. They have tested this with the professionals that are going to use this every day. That's why it stands up to the heat from steaming, produces unmatched silky texture, and it creates balance in the beverage. And the beverage is always focused on the coffee. So it's a great experience overall. Go to pacificfoodservice.com to learn more and try it in your store and see what I mean. I think you're going to love it. And if you're looking for the best options for plant-based beverages in your cafe, then I think the Barista series from Pacific is exactly the product that you need. So today, everybody, we are going to be talking with somebody. You see the book right next to me here, holding it in my hand. It's an illusion. But we are going to be talking with Will Guidara. So excited about this. His book, Unreasonable Hospitality, has been making the rounds. Sounds a little bit too casual, but it really has been changing people's perspective on how we can approach coffee service in our industry. Coffee is kind of a casual thing, but we draw inspiration from other areas of service that are challenging us to new levels. And this is not something that's focused so much on the product, but the people that we serve and the people we serve with. And I'm really excited because Will and I have a conversation all about his evolution into this philosophy and how unreasonable hospitality is something that we all can employ in our businesses. So if you're not familiar, I want to make you familiar with Will Guidara. He is the founder of Thank You, which is a hospitality company that develops world-class destinations, and it helps leaders across industries transform their approach to customer service. He is also the former co-owner of 11 Madison Park, and under his leadership, the restaurant received numerous accolades, including 4 stars from the New York Times, 3 Michelin stars, and in 2017 was named number 1 on the list of world's 50 best restaurants. Pretty amazing. He is also the co-founder of the Welcome Conference, which is an annual conference that brings together the best minds in the world of hospitality, and is a graduate of Cornell University. And he has co-authored 4 cookbooks. He was named one of Crane's New York Business's 40 Under 40, and is a recipient of the Wall Street Journal Magazine's Innovator Award. And like I mentioned, Will's latest book, Unreasonable Hospitality, is where he shares many of the lessons about service and leadership that he has learned over the course of his career in restaurants. And he makes the case that any business can choose to be in the hospitality industry by taking ordinary transactions and turning them into memorable experiences. And this is the kind of stuff that I am just fascinated by, when people go to the nth degree to create those memorable experiences. This is a restaurant situation where Will has that experience, but in a restaurant there are so many small touch points, similar to the kind of interactions we have in coffee. Every day with customers, we have a chance to literally change people's lives for the better through a cup of coffee. It doesn't have to just be a slogan that we use in our values statement. We can live our values with this kind of philosophy. And so as Will and I discuss this, I hope that you are not only absorbing the conversation and the content, but also thinking about how you can apply it to your coffee bar and with your staff. It is possible. And I'm just, again, really grateful for the opportunity to sit down with Will and share his experiences with the Keys to the Shop audience. So without anything else from me, let's get right to it. Here now is my conversation with Will Guidara, author of the book, Unreasonable Hospitality. Will, welcome to Keys to the Shop. A pleasure to have you today. How are you?
I'm doing really well, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, a pleasure. And, one of the things that I'm really excited about is that through reading your book, and I had been aware of you from just reading food stuff. I actually have a Daniel Boulud book on my shelf, and I have some, inspiration in my career taken from the restaurant world. The thread of your book, and it seems like your philosophy on craft and hospitality is this like joyful intentionality. And it really warms my heart to like see that stuff in print and just exuding from practices. And so it's really a pleasure to have you here to talk about all of this. One of the things I want to start out with is the idea of how you eventually found your way to loving hospitality as you pursued a career in restaurants. Yeah, a lot of people will pursue, the craft and the business and all of that, but it seems like hospitality really took a hold on your mind and your heart. How did that evolve for you?
Well, first of all, I love how you call out the word intentionality, which is, it's certainly one that I use with quite a bit of frequency. I think if the book was distilled down into one line, it's about the idea of being more creative and more intentional in pursuit of relationships. Which, by the way, is something we all innately understand, right? Any time I've ever gotten advice from a couple that's been happily married for a really long time, one of the things they'll always say is, marriage takes work. You need to pursue your person, right? Yeah. I think one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was, our marriage works because every day I decide when I wake up to pursue her as a friend and as a wife. And that only comes with intention. And one of the things I just think is so clear and then also helpful once you fully digest it is this idea that work and life are both all about relationships, and many of the lessons you learn in work can be applied to life and vice versa. And so, I mean, when I doubled down on hospitality as the thing I wanted to pursue with relentlessness and the thing I wanted to be unreasonable about, well, that happened much later in my life. But I think that, like many people, I've had ebbs and flows in my focus, and hospitality was a big part of my life at a very early age. My mom, you know this from reading the book, got sick when I was a kid, became a quadriplegic. And yet my dad maintained his role of being an incredible dad to me and an extraordinary caregiver to her, and still found the time to be an amazing professional. All of that comes with being intentional, choosing how you're going to spend your time, choosing the things that matter to you and how you're going to split your focus between them. And watching him care for her and watching him be a great dad to me, well, opened my eyes at a very early age to the extraordinary power of hospitality, because that was what his success in both of those endeavors was rooted in. But it was also around this idea that my dad was working 12, 14-hour days. I'm an only child. My mom was a quadriplegic. It was a team effort, right? Like, I needed to care for her too. And at an early age, perhaps it was because my dad never felt bad for himself in the situation. Perhaps it was because it happened to me so early in life. There was never a moment where I felt bad for myself about her condition. To the contrary, I always derived significant and genuine pleasure out of being able to care for her in a way that no other kids ever got to with their parents. And so it was just ingrained in me early on, and always one of the areas in my life from which I derived the most pleasure and energy.
Wow. The difficulty that a situation like that provides as a test in life, I suppose, in choosing the way that you and your father have chosen is, it's inspiring. I mean, when my wife and I were listening to this on a road trip, this story, and we just had to rewind it and listen to it again. It was very touching, and it was one of the things that made me think, this human connection that you refer to a lot is something that, similar to what you experience when you have a really good meal, or I had a really good shot of espresso or a macchiato in Oklahoma that I bought 5 more of, and it was a bad decision, but it was like a very, I needed to get the taste in me, you know what I mean? Like, that connection doesn't go away. I can't shake it. It's an indelible belief that I have, that no matter who tells me otherwise, that's in my heart. And I imagine it's similar, because you talk about the ebb and flow, but there's a lot of trials and tribulation in the restaurant world and in your own life from, your beginnings till now. Was that always some kind of an unshakable foundation for you as you grew and matured as a person and as a professional?
Yeah, but again, when I talk about pursuing something with intention, there was most certainly a season in my career, most specifically when I first got to 11 Madison Park, and our ambitions were to be the best restaurant in New York, where I was less focused on hospitality and became much more focused on excellence, which I have no regret about. I feel like excellence is a precursor, right? If you want to be the best of the best, you need to be excellent. But it wasn't until halfway through that journey that I realized that, well, excellence, if you're trying to be the best of the best, at least with the impact that I wanted to make, excelling with excellence, that was table stakes. That's how you got to be in the game. But to really be the best, it was about taking the same focus that we were pursuing the product with and applying that same amount of focus towards how we were making people feel. Mm-hmm. And I talk a lot about the difference between service and hospitality, and I think it's important to identify service is a part of the product, right? Service is about how technically good you are. In our worlds, service is about getting the right thing to the right person within the right amount of time. Yeah. But hospitality is the extent to which you create the conditions for connection while you're doing that thing.
That's powerful. And it is a hard pursuit when you yourself have high points and low points emotionally, to enter into a intentional pursuit of making somebody feel something in spite of the way you feel in service. I mean, we're dealing with this right now, just in a post-pandemic kind of environment where we're more conscious of our self-care than ever. And thankfully, I'm thankful that people are wanting to care for people also in a different and higher way. So the success of your book is just a part of that movement. But when you decide to pursue something where you call it unreasonable hospitality, can you kind of tell us about what makes it unreasonable, and what is it fighting against within us that kind of defines it as against sort of this maybe self-preservation instinct or something like that? What define this for us, and how that battle can kind of be won in the service environment?
Well, I want to say a couple things. You said that sometimes it's hard to give to others on the days that you're tired, right? Or on the days that you're not feeling great and all of that. And by the way, I agree with that statement. But it brings to mind three ideas. One, yes, I do agree and believe in the focus on self-care, because the metaphor I love to use is that in hospitality, we are constantly pouring water from our pitchers into other people's glasses. And if we don't pause and take the time to refill our pitchers, we're going to run out of water to pour. I think there are too many people that talk about self-care as if it sits in opposition to serving other people. I think the two are part of the same virtuous cycle. So that's one thing. The second thing is, well, that's the beauty of being a part of a team, right? Because there are going to be days when one person on the team is just tired and doesn't have that much to give. But if the team is fully locked in, and if you, as a leader, are doing the right things such that the people around you cease being a collection of individuals and come together as a trusting team, then when one person slows down, other people can pick them up. And I think that requires the wherewithal of the individual to know when they should be taking a back seat and empowering other people to get into pole position. But it's also this idea, I think it's pretty well understood, in spite of the fact that it does not sound right, that if you wake up and you are hungover, one of the best things you can do is go to the gym. Right? And yet, when you wake up and you are hungover, the last thing in the world you want to do is go to the gym. I believe there are very few things more energizing than seeing the look on someone else's face than when they receive a gift you're responsible for giving them. And on a day where I felt a little off and maybe didn't feel up to delivering the kind of inspiring pre-meal that I believe every team deserves on a daily basis from the person who leads them, sometimes it was giving that pre-meal that was what I needed to feel like a more fully realized version of myself. Or similarly, when I feel like I'm in a little bit of a funk, bestowing graciousness and generosity on other people is exactly what I need to get myself out of it. So I just said three things, all of which are reasonably the same, and all of them are a little bit different. And in saying all three of those things, I'm just trying to provide an a la carte menu of options for those days when you don't feel like your best self.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe you need to reinvest in yourself. Maybe you need to tap out and tap someone else in. Or maybe that's actually the moment where you just need to give more, because giving more might actually be exactly what you need. Now, how do I define unreasonable hospitality? I think that's kind of where you were going. And like, what are...
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. The title was one the publishers originally pushed back on because they're like, hold on, but unreasonable and hospitality, that doesn't make sense together. And I said, well, no, that's kind of the point. When you look across disciplines, look at the best barista, right? When you think about these guys that are winning the barista Olympics or whatever those things are called.
Right.
Or the great coffee roasters or the great espresso shops, right? Testing humidity over the course of the day, tweaking the grinders, this, that, weighing, scales, all like blah, blah, like da-da-da-da. It is completely unreasonable. And it's celebrated. Coffee. But it's celebrated in its unreasonableness because it is in pursuit of making something that is marginally better than what anyone else has made before.
Yeah.
It's impossible to change the game without being unreasonable, and being unreasonable has always been celebrated in pursuit of product. I'm just simply stacking the words on top of one another to say that we should start celebrating that same relentlessness in pursuit of people. Mm-hmm. What does it actually mean? It just means caring more and trying harder. And I think the beautiful thing when you stack it against hospitality is I say trying harder, not it is hard, because it's not hard. It just requires trying harder. And I think that distinction is an important one to make because, well, if something is objectively hard, you can start to make excuses around why you can't achieve it. If all something requires is that you try harder, there are no excuses. It's just a matter of whether you care enough to go in on it.
That's a fundamental belief that there's something there to pursue that will lead to a desired outcome. It's not the fatalistic view of this would be, it's not, I can't go any farther. I believe that I can't go farther. There's nothing else. And just like the analogy of going to the gym, if you're hungover, it's a exercise in faith that you have something left to give that will give back to you, I suppose. We've all been there. I've been there in my capacity as a barista and a trainer and other things where your belief that you can go a little bit more deeply into something pays off in the way that you see something else come to fruition as a result of it. Or somebody writes to you and says, that was a red letter day in my life when you did this, when you did that, or you said something that reasonably you were busy. You didn't need to say it, but you did because you're like, you know what? Screw it. It seems maybe even awkward. I'm going to affirm this person. And it is amazing how just tapping into that changes your belief about the world around you in anything. Like you said in the beginning, it's like any pursuit. It doesn't have to be coffee or food or just be life itself. But you all started to employ this, or at least see it, and then start to define it as a philosophy. I mean, what were the early signs that this was something that was going to make a difference in the way that hospitality was exercised in the restaurant?
Honestly, I started pursuing it before I even fully understood what it meant, which I think is okay. I think far too many people / companies spend so much time trying to perfectly articulate an idea that they never start pursuing one. Sometimes I think that if you feel enough of a connection to something, just start to pursue it and it will reveal itself to you along the way. I mean, this came after we came in last place at the 50 best, we came in number 50, and I was embarrassed and angry, and people always challenge my perspective a bit around that. Like, hold on, you were one of the best restaurants in the world.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but in that room we were last, and honestly, I think like I understand what people are trying to do when they say, hey, da-da-da, you were one of the 50 best. But I think we kind of too quickly run from anger in competitive situations. I think it's okay to be angry and to feel fired up and a little pissed off and competitive every once in a while. I don't think we can sit or live in that emotion for too much of our lives, but we shouldn't run away from it either, because if you are a competitive person, you're constantly competing, and you don't need to rationalize your emotion. You don't need to like bring perspective to every situation. Sometimes you just need to feel the full weight of your disappointment and then use that to help drive you forward. What can you learn from it? How can you let it motivate you? And so after we came in last place, I definitely went through all the stages of grief, but ultimately landed on acceptance. Anger, when channeled correctly, oftentimes does give way to acceptance. And, you know, my dad gave me this paperweight. It's where I'm at my desk, so it's still here. What would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail? He gave this to me when I was a kid. It's one of the things I've held on to my entire life because it's been really important to me. He'd always challenged me to answer that question honestly, and no matter what the answer was, to just try to do that, saying that far too many people are scared to say their most audacious goal out loud for fear that if they do and don't achieve it, they'll let themselves and those around them down. But if you don't have the confidence and the courage to dream big out loud, it's very unlikely that you'll ever achieve your biggest dreams. Not to mention the fact that if you do try to shoot for the moon and you don't succeed, well, at the very least, you'll be a whole lot closer for having tried. So that night, I wrote on a cocktail napkin, I mean, it's in the book, we will be number one of the world. But a goal without a strategy is nothing more than a pipe dream.
Yeah.
And I'm most certainly not alone in what I'm about to say, which is that every time I've ever tried to accomplish something, I start by studying the people who have accomplished it before me. It's reckless not to, right? You need to learn lessons from the past before you ultimately try to chart your own future. And when I looked at the different chefs, they were all chefs that had topped that list. They'd done so by being unreasonable in pursuit of the food that they were serving, the way it was plated, the ingredients that were used, the techniques they were developing and employing, the staff, the training, all of it. I think one of the best ways to genuinely leave your mark is to, okay, yes, A, study those who have done something before you, and then B, identify what your own superpowers and how you can layer those superpowers on top of whatever you learn from those other people. And referencing our earlier conversation, I was one of the few hospitality guys in a room filled with chefs. Excellence had gotten us on that list, but if I could be just as unreasonable in pursuit of hospitality as they were in pursuit of food, then we could actually really have an impact. And so that was a turning point for us. And then I went back to the restaurant with my team and collectively started to unpack, what did unreasonable hospitality actually mean? And it was the journey that happened next that not only helped us define it, but to fully discover the power that it has.
I like the word discover, and you've used it a couple of times here. The co-creative element of having something like a restaurant or a cafe kind of emerge for the purpose of serving that time and space and the people that interact with it. When you pursue something as high profile as best restaurant in the world, my guess is that there's a temptation to really white knuckle it in terms of, I want this. Like, I and the chef, we want this, and so we're going to have our way. but you were talking to the team about what we needed to discover. Talk to us about that thinking about, relying on other people to help you in the discovery process rather than just controlling the process to make it your vision. And how can we effectively include people in that and build that trust muscle? Because sometimes it's really hard to trust people around you when you've got aspirations like that.
Well, you say how could we? Let me answer first. Why should we? Because I think when you start with that, it becomes pretty hard to even question whether you should. You just have to figure out how you can, right? It's undeniable that the ideas of the many will always be better than the ideas of one or two people. Yes, you always need a leader, someone with a point of view who is the, whatever you want to call it, the editor-in-chief. Otherwise, a business will feel like it's designed by committee as opposed to through a singular point of view. But that doesn't mean you can't open the filter up to receive as many ideas as humanly possible. That's one. Two, David Marquet, a retired Navy captain, famously said in most organizations, the people on the front line have all of the information and none of the authority, whereas the people at the top of the organization have all of the authority and none of the information. It's just patently stupid to try to make every decision without engaging the people that are actually engaging with the people that you're serving to get as much of that information as possible. Like when you think about it through that lens, no one would try to make big decisions without doing as much research as possible. And the best research you can do if you lead a team is by engaging them in the process. 3, Danny Meyer famously says, hospitality is a team sport. It doesn't matter how good I am at making other people feel good. Even if you just have one restaurant, it's impossible for you to touch every table. If you are not creating an environment where everyone is on board and inspired to do what you would do were you in the room, even when you're not going to succeed. I don't care. I could go to a restaurant with the most hospitable owner in the world. If the server is not hospitable, the restaurant sucks. And I have yet to meet a single individual that won't give more of themselves to help something succeed than once they feel a genuine hand of helping to determine what that thing is. If you want the team to feel aligned and bought into the spirit of your collective endeavor, it's not enough to just say, this is where you are going. You need to also give them some sense of ownership, even the smallest amount of ownership in helping you determine how you're going to get there. So, yes, I have a lifelong struggle between the intellectual knowledge that empowering the team is right and my sometimes instinctual drive to control every single little detail of an experience in pursuit of achieving an unparalleled level of excellence. But what I've learned is that the more you can trust your team, the more trustworthy they become, and the better the operation gets in spades. And even if, while relinquishing control, you end up doing a few things that you don't ultimately agree with, the net positive is so much greater for having done exactly that.
In the net positive, are you referring to the overall experience or the culture that results as a exercise in trust, where it was maybe not what you would have done, but you're gaining a culture that will reap a reward that's far greater than the exact thing you were shooting for?
Both. So, in the experience that people are receiving, I mean, my whole thing is that like the best hospitality experiences are those which include a one size fits one gesture where people are doing things specific to the person they're serving. And in our restaurant, that included everything from, buying people DVDs in the middle of their meal a long time ago, or fueling people's parking meters, or filling a private dining room with sand, or sending them home with sleds or teddy bears, or serving them hot dogs, or, endless things, right? Let's say I had chosen to be a control or a filter on what my team was or wasn't allowed to do for the guest in the moment, because these are real-time decisions, right? People are only in your restaurant or shop for so long. We would have done so many fewer things. I would have been a bottleneck in the process, right? And if you're ever trying to accomplish something, remove as many of the bottlenecks as possible. So let's say we would have done 100 of them instead of thousands and thousands and thousands. And in my view of what right looked like, we would have been batting 100% on those 100. But it's about numbers, not about percentages, right? Like I'd rather bat 98% on 10,000 than 100% on 100, because we're in the business of impacting people. So that's how it affects the experience. And at the same time, would my team have been as excited and encouraged and felt as creative and motivated to come up with these things if they didn't feel the agency of being able to run with an idea? If 3,000 times they said, no, I don't like that idea. No, they would have felt less empowered. And let's go back to what I said before around authority and information. At the end of the day, some of the things that we did for a guest, I probably didn't really love some of them. But the person who came up with that idea knew the guest that it was being done for better than I did. They were the ones actually serving them. Mm-hmm. I think the best way I'm able to motivate myself to be able to do something is to take a big enough step back and analyze it such that it becomes a very pragmatic decision. And so that's how I generally think about things, and that's what I just tried to outline there.
Yeah, the idea that you are in the impact business, it leaves room for something that the result will be transcendent, because the rules that are out there for, what does it take to, the 10 steps to a successful coffee shop, or, how to open a restaurant 101, Barnes and Nobles or Amazon, buy a book, and that's what you do. And you're supposed to get the result. The result is once those things are in place, you are successful. But somehow it doesn't transcend those limitations, because what you've done is it's a recipe, and not to sound trite, but without the love, that whole saying, it's just a fill in the blank. It does have some weight to it. Like the intentionality can kind of be felt if you did what you were saying you could have done, which is control everything. You would have had maybe a successful restaurant, but in the end you had the best. And then beyond that, I'm sure for the people, everyone already kind of knew you were the best before you won the award, the people that were eating there, right?
Yeah. I mean, the thing I always like to say is, okay, is it possible that there is a best restaurant in the world? Probably not. That's a little bit crazy to say, but I believe that list acknowledges the restaurant that's having the greatest impact on the world of restaurants at any given time. And that's an impact I'm happy that we were able to make, is this idea of giving our team the permission and then the resources to be unreasonable in pursuit of how we made people feel. Not at the expense of excellence, but on top of excellence. And yeah, it did make the guests happier. And yeah, it did build our bottom line, because although a lot of the stuff we did required us investing resources, the return on those investments were dramatic. But it was also just amazing for the people that we worked with. I think leadership has changed dramatically over the years. Once upon a time, the greatest leader in the room was just the person that had the confidence and conviction to point and tell a group of people, this is where we're going, right? It's like Braveheart days. People crave leadership, and people are just kind of waiting for someone to step up and play the role. Then that was no longer enough, and maybe it was Simon Sinek and Start With Why, and people wanted to be told where they were going and why they should want to go there.
Yeah.
And now, as I said before, I think establishing truly collaborative environments is a necessary part of leading a team that is trying to accomplish something of creative magnitude. Because when we did all of this, the people that worked for us were no longer just serving plates of food that someone else had created. They were imbuing the experience with their own sense of creativity. We had turned a bunch of salespeople and turned them into product designers. And I just encourage as many people out there as possible to look at the people on their team as more than just cogs in the machine there to execute an experience that's been designed to perfection, but perhaps more as co-conspirators in figuring out how to make the experience that much better.
Lovely. That's great. And as you pursued this, I'm sure you got better at hiring people who would harmonize with that particular ideal. That we can hire people that don't harmonize is a given. But learning how to get people, you mentioned in the book, how do they work with the team? But at the same time, I'm imagining you also want somebody who's going to be able to help push the team in some ways. How have you kind of settled on an ideal for hiring people, especially, let's say, with a younger workforce? There's a lot of people want to know about the idea of, Gen Z, and in coffee, we have a notoriously very, very young workforce. And so this idea we've been talking about, I think, is really salient to the moment, because coffee shops, this is the thing, right? So in terms of recruitment and hiring people, how have you decided this is best done with those ideals?
Well, man, there's so many different answers to this. I was recently on a ranch in Wyoming with a guy who's quickly becoming a very good friend. His name is Angus Collins. He rows across oceans. That's what he does for a living. At one point, he held the record for having rowed the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Indian Ocean. At one time, he had the record for rowing all three at a faster time than anyone in history. And when I asked him, I always like to ask this question to anyone who does something dramatically different than me. Hey, if I wanted to start rowing oceans, what would be your advice? And with a bit of coaxing, he ultimately said, pick the right team, not the best team. He's like, I put my teams together. There's plenty of time through the process to get them in shape. There's plenty of time to teach them how to row. But you put a 4-person team on a boat and row across an ocean. That's 70 days. 2 hours rowing, 2 hours sleeping, 2 hours rowing, 2 hours sleeping for 70-something days. If the team doesn't vibe, they will not succeed, no matter how good any of them are as individuals. I've never hired for experience. What we do for a living is not rocket science. You can teach it. And if you think you need to hire only people that have done what you're trying to do for many, many years, then you're basically just admitting that you're not that great a leader or a teacher.
No.
And you said it already. Too many people think, okay, I'm hiring this person. Are they a good reflection of me? And that's a half-formed thought. Is this person a good reflection of my entire team? Because at the end of the day, people work for you, but they're working with the people that have already made the choice to work for you. And so it's about chemistry more than anything else. Are they hardworking? Are they optimistic? I think a lot of people have such unruly lists of experience and qualifications that they require from someone in order for them to join the team. And it's not dissimilar to that friend that we all have, guy or girl, who has been wanting to get married for a really long time and is amazing in every way, but can't find their person because they have too many boxes that person needs to check.
No, I have high standards. That's what.
Yes, but if there's too many filters, you could inadvertently be filtering out the person that's actually just right for you in your life or for you on your team.
Yeah, that's a good word. I mean, the right person is I'm curious what you think about this, the idea that they are created also, in a sense, like the idea that somebody is just an inert object might lead you to treat people as objects. So the logical conclusion of the idea that they have to have the it factor and all that stuff, that high standards, right, means that there's no room for growth in a way.
I mean, there's definitely a nature versus nurture metaphor that we could use with hiring as well as rearing children. And I haven't thought it through enough. But, I mean, isn't that the obligation of a leader anyway? Are you meant to be hiring great people that you believe in and helping them to get better? And if you're not helping people grow when they work with you, then you're not actually fulfilling your promise to them. You're only allowing them to fulfill their promise to you.
Wow. Yeah, in you as a leader need accountability yourself that you could let yourself off the hook for.
Well, accountability comes through invitation. Basically to invite your team to call you out when you're going down the wrong road. Mm-hmm. To invite them to call you out respectfully.
Yeah.
And respond well when they do.
Oh, that's key. And if you're defensive, which is the default for most people, is to be defensive, what is that a sign? I mean, that has to be a sign that maybe you're not as in tune with what's necessary to create this dynamic culture. Even if you speak it, that you want it, the reality of curating that or allowing it to form, comes right back to what we were talking about. It's an emotional process that you have to be willing to be uncomfortable with, because it feels like you are going to be grown as a person. And I have had somebody who was wanting some training in coffee. They didn't want to have their staff see them learn, though. So they wanted a different training for them, and then they wanted to, have the training with their staff because they were the owners and they should know everything, was their idea. We ultimately didn't work together, but that philosophy of, I am the perfect entity of authority in this place, and speak to that a little bit, because it feels like the insecurity of our authority leads us to be defensive and kind of self-sabotage the culture that we kind of know we need, but we don't know how to let ourselves, allow it to happen.
Well, so a couple of things. I often say that praise is affirmation and criticism is investment. There's nothing more beautiful any individual can do than step outside of their comfort zone for long enough than to provide thoughtful criticism to another person, because in the absence of receiving it, we're never going to be able to grow. And by the way, I say step outside of your comfort zone because it is not fun to criticize someone else. I don't care where you are in the hierarchy and where they are in the hierarchy. And one of the best things you can do to make sure that you stop growing is to be defensive when people do that, because guess what? It already sucks to criticize someone, and if they make it even suckier, you're going to stop trying. Now, as it pertains to a leader feeling they need to be perfect, I think that was a thing for a really long time. But the bottom line, and I literally just posted a quote from Hamdi at Chobani that he used at the Welcome Conference. Make I don't know okay.
Right.
The only way you can get a group of people to genuinely want to follow you is if they feel like they can trust you. And if you try to pretend to be perfect, people won't be able to trust you. Because the one thing we all know is that human beings are by definition imperfect. And if someone pretends to be perfect, you know they're just lying to you. The best way to get a group of people to offer up a bit of themselves to you is to begin by offering up a piece of yourself to them first. The best way to get people to receive well criticism from you is to show that you're willing to criticize yourself, or that you're willing to receive it well.
Yeah.
The best way to encourage vulnerability in others is to be vulnerable yourself. And here's the thing, until people are willing to let their guards down, the level of connection that is required for a group of people to unlock their collective creativity and capacity, well, it can never be fully reached. And so, okay, the guy you're referencing, if he knew nothing about coffee, I can understand him wanting to get a little cheat session before he brings the entire team in, because he doesn't want to look like an absolute idiot. But if when he got together with the entire team, he says, guys, I've been doing this for a long time, I know everything, that's also wrong. Right? Like, hey, guys, you know what? It's been a while since I've done this. I actually had a little refresher course the other day because I wanted to come in ready to rock with all of you.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a matter of sort of, we had an episode that said you don't have to be the best barista to be the best leader. And if what you said is, and I believe is true, the idea that it's the right team, then just as much as like you need to be the right leader for that team.
I often, when I'm talking to people who like have their own small business, and the business was started on the back of their proficiency in one craft or another, there's always an inflection point in the growth of the business where they need to be asked the following question: are you the player or are you the coach? Because, listen, you take any championship team, let's take a baseball team, you pull their best pitcher, they can still win the World Series. You take away their coach, they have no chance. And great coaches understand that, yeah, their players are a lot better than they are at their position in that sport, whether because of God-given talent or age or whatever it is. A leader has no ability, if you're trying to do anything of consequence, to be better than everyone at your team at the thing that they are doing for you. If you are, then you just haven't put together a very good team. The leader's role is to draw out the best of those people such that in harmony, the team becomes unstoppable.
When we're talking about coffee shops, and it's a unique thing because one of the things that drives this show and, a philosophy of a lot of people who listen is that the accessibility of a good cup of coffee, or just coffee in general, is this affordable luxury. It's an industry where we see a ton of people every day. Everyday coffee shops see their community go in and out, and they have such an ability to impact lives. However, the interactions are very quick. And as a result, it becomes very rote. And so the challenge we find is, while we don't have the best coffee shop in the world competitions necessarily, we have the barista Olympics, the World Barista Championships, and things like that. But that's it's a team sport, of course, but the individual wins it. We have our own little ecosystem that we are comparing ourselves against to see, are we achieving that goal. But it's hard to know if we are, because it's so quick, these interactions, and we want the intentionality. We want to feel like when we look out upon the landscape of 2 or 3, 10 years of running this coffee shop, we've achieved it. In lieu of those competitions and those pursuits, how would you advise these more casual entities of cafes to pursue excellence in these smaller compartments of time and but more frequent opportunity?
Well, I also felt like you were going down the road of what metrics, what yardsticks, in the absence of big accolades, what can motivate us, right?
Yes, that's right.
I believe in metrics, by the way. Mm-hmm. I believe that like any metric you can find, like data is valuable, use it and give yourself, your team, something to strive for. Just not average check. Never make average check the thing, because that starts to bring out that encourages the wrong behavior. If you're shooting for average check and average check alone, then your team is celebrated for selling people stuff they didn't actually want.
Oh, wow.
Right? Because you put a group of people that are competitive together, and I'm like, I'm going to sell you 3 muffins and this, when all you wanted was a cup of coffee.
Upselling is a weapon now, right?
So I think whatever metric, whether as a leadership team, retention, whether as the silliest things, Yelp reviews, or whatever the hell it is. Like, I do think coming up with small little things that you can just aim for, marginal improvements that not only give you something to be focused on achieving, but something to celebrate when you achieve them. In terms of how to actually establish that kind of human connection when you're serving a lot of people in a short period of time, I mean, there's a bunch of different ways, or a bunch of different ideas. I always talk about like the power of being present, the idea that you need to slow down to speed up, the idea that multitasking is not the most efficient approach. And sometimes if you don't have the time to engage a guest in conversation multiple times over the course of their experience, that's okay, so long as if there's a moment where they know you are fully present with them, even if it's just for one moment. If I go to a coffee shop that I go to every single day and it's just boom, 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 there's getting me out the door, all about throughput. That's bad, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If I go to another coffee shop and the barista is the friendliest person on earth and they're just engaging everyone in so much incredible conversation, but it takes like an hour to get a cup of coffee, that's also bad. But if I go to a coffee shop and there's a moment where I feel fully seen and recognized, I feel like I belong there, and the person, even if it's just that moment where they hand me that cup of coffee, I can tell that they are not thinking in that one moment alone about what coffee they need to make next, but about how grateful they are that I have made them a part of my routine. You can feel that, even if there's not even words attached to it. And then to be very intentional about who you go deeper with and when and why you go deeper with them. My point is, it's the sincerity of the moment, not how elaborate the moment itself is.
Right. We have a lot of checklists in coffee, and everyone does. I read a book, Knives at Dawn. It was about the Bocuse d'Or, and the checklist that they have. It was overwhelming. It was a little bit stressful to read about it, and the idea that we can take hospitality that is so relational and so impactful and this to that one person style you're talking about, but to also have systems that help set us up to be able to do that well. Sometimes it feels antithetical to the idea that we just kind of have to feel it and never, and I know you have, in particular, 11 Madison Park, the idea of, this is something we do now. This is institutionalized. When we get something good, how do we not kill it? So when we put it in a system, so it becomes rote, like, oh, I said hello to somebody. Some people walk in a Moe's or a Walgreens, they say hello to you, but that's not the same. That's a checklist. So how do we kind of marry that intentionality with consistency?
Well, I think, anytime you're giving your team a script of things they have to say, then they might as well just be like dressed as Mickey Mouse at Disneyland. They're no longer individuals, they're actors. I made this mistake. I write about it in the book about giving my team a script. Never give your team a script. Explain to them what they're trying to accomplish and why they are meant to accomplish that, and less like prescribing them exactly how they're meant to accomplish it. In our restaurant, like you were allowed to call the guest dude if that felt like the right word in the interaction. Really? Because I'd always rather someone be served by an individual who was coming across as their most fully realized self than someone in character. I mean, you ask good questions, because every time you ask one question, I feel like you slipped another one in there. I think, like, to the baristas listening to this, and this is, by the way, I'm guilty of the same thing, or I have been over the course of my career. No one is as impressed with how good you are at making a shot of espresso as you are impressed yourself. And like, no one's there to like pray at the altar of how good you are behind the espresso machine. People are there because they want a delicious cup of coffee and they want to feel a little bit of love from the person that made it for them. If you think you're so good at it that you don't need to be kind, that's short-term success. It's not long-term success. Yeah. And I mean, you see it countless times. Like, maybe it was a thing for a measure of time when, like, the tattooed, like, rude barista who was, like, such a stickler about serving their own ego as opposed to the people that they're actually in the business of serving was thriving. But I believe that time is very nearly behind us. And as much pleasure and satisfaction as you get from making a perfect cup of coffee, why limit yourself to only that pleasure and satisfaction? Why not open your mind up to the fact that you can get just as much, if not more, from making the people around you feel really freaking good?
No, that is exactly what a lot of coffee shops start their businesses for. And it is definitely in the ether. It's in the culture now. I feel that people are tired of the transactional nature of hospitality services. And as the barista workforce gets older, I feel like we start to, maybe we start families and we have, more moments of maturity where we're like, I'd like to feel like someone's treating me kind. Maybe I should do that too. I need a little grace, and maybe I should give it as well.
Hey, it's such a pleasure to be on here with you, man. I appreciate the conversation and the time.
Yeah. Thank you, Will. This has been a really great conversation, and I am excited for all that your book is doing out there in the world of hospitality. Tell us where we can learn more about the Welcome Conference. Thank you, and the book Unreasonable Hospitality.
If you go to unreasonablehospitality.com, that's kind of a good gateway to all the different things we're doing. Or follow me on Instagram at Guidara.
Perfect. Thank you, Will. Really appreciate you being here, and thank you for your insights.
Thanks, bud. Have a great day.
All right. Well, huge thank you to Will for being on the show. And this has just been a really fantastic conversation. I think one of the things that we take away from this is the fact that it's about the intentionality that we bring to our presence and our decisions in the midst of our service to people. And through this book and through this conversation, you can tell this is the kind of value that when you practice it and you see the pleasure you get from it and that you can produce for others, it becomes addictive and it becomes rewarding. And this is the kind of thing that sustains us in the midst of the ups and downs of our own industry and our personal ups and downs as we go into service for others through coffee, through restaurants, or whatever you're doing. This is totally possible. And I'm really grateful for Will showing us how it can be done. And so a huge thank you again to Will for joining us. If you're interested in reading this book, you can just look up Unreasonable Hospitality. Get it anywhere. You can go on Amazon. You can go to any bookstore, bookseller. This is a fantastic book. And just look for the really recognizable yellow cover and you'll be in the right place. And I want you to also visit thankyou.nyc. That is Will's company that focuses on helping others produce memorable experiences through their businesses. Check out the Welcome Conference and also be sure to follow Will on Instagram at Guidara. And you'll find all of these in the show notes as well and here in the description on YouTube. So if you have any questions, comments, or feedback about today's episode, feel free to email me. Chris@keystotheshop.com is where you can do that. You can also reach out there if you are interested in Keys to the Shop consulting. And now, speaking of conferences, we have a conference in coffee. It's called Coffee Fest. Out of all the places you can go and events you can attend, I think Coffee Fest is probably the most value, say bang for your buck. It's really an awesome resourcing hub for people who are wanting to run awesome coffee bars. It's been going on for 30 years, and I've been participating, I think, since 2004. And almost every show, that's a lot of shows, and it just keeps on, not, I wouldn't say just only being relevant, but also advancing with the industry and providing the resourcing and information you need to run a fantastic coffee bar. We've had 4 shows every year for the past few years, and now the last show of 2023 is happening in Orlando in November. I'm a presenter and a judge for latte art competition there, the Coffee Fest Latte Art World Championship Open, and it is a fantastic vibe and community there. You get to rub elbows with like-minded professionals. Access to the trade show floor means you get to interact with vendors that are there to support your business. Lectures, trainings, workshops, panel discussions, super enriching time. Check them out at coffeefest.com. Learn more information. Use the code KEYS, KEYS. Get 50% off general admission when you use KEYS. Keys to register yourself and your team. So I hope to see you in Orlando in November, if not at one of the shows in 2024. Check them out at coffeefest.com. And with that, that is the end of our show today, everyone. I really appreciate you all, as always. Thank you for supporting the show. Don't forget to subscribe and buy Will's book, Unreasonable Hospitality. And when you read it, most importantly, put it into action with your people, with your guests, and you'll see the magic that you get to create through that. Thank you, everyone. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.